Brendan, a weary traveler, had been chasing airports and flights for what felt like a week. His latest layover was at a vast international airport he hadn't visited before. As he disembarked from his last flight and ambled through the fluorescent-lit corridors, he found himself inexplicably drawn to a terminal he didn't recognize from the announcement's Terminal 0. Curiosity piqued, he followed the modest signage. The hallway leading to Terminal 0 had a subtle chill, the hum of the lights a tad quieter, the shadows slightly deeper. When Brendan finally stepped into the terminal, he found it unlike any he'd seen. The expansive waiting area was dimly lit, with tall black windows showing a dense, impenetrable fog outside. It seemed perpetually stuck at twilight. Flights were displayed on an old-fashioned wooden departures board. The destinations were puzzling: Limbo, Oblivion, Nihility, and Purgatorium, to name a few. The passengers waiting weren't any less unusual. They sat still, dressed in clothes from various epochs, their expressions empty, their eyes distant. Believing he'd wandered into a themed section of the airport or some elaborate art installation, Brendan chuckled and approached a nearby cafe named Eternabrew. Behind the counter stood an elderly barista, her eyes milky and unseeing. "A cappuccino, please," he ordered, offering a friendly smile. The barista, moving slowly, prepared his drink without uttering a word. When she handed him the cup, her fingers brushed his, and a sudden jolt of cold washed over him, memories flooding his mind, memories that weren't his. Visions of wars, heartbreaks, partings, and endless travels consumed him. Shaken, he retreated from the counter, leaving his untouched drink behind. Hoping to get some clarity, Brendan approached a group of passengers. A man dressed in a World War I uniform, a woman in a 1920s flapper dress, a little boy holding a teddy bear, and a teenager in 90s grunge attire, sat in silent camaraderie. "Excuse me," Brendan began, "is this some kind of themed terminal? An experience event, perhaps?" The teenager looked up, his eyes hollow. "We're waiting for our flight." "And where are you headed?" Brendan prodded. "To the place we've been destined," the little boy whispered, clutching his teddy bear tighter. The realization struck Brendan with a weight he wasn't prepared for. Terminal 0 was no ordinary terminal. It was a junction for souls, a place where spirits bound by unfinished business, regrets, or those trapped by circumstance awaited their final journey. Panicking, Brendan turned to leave. But every exit he tried led him back to Terminal 0. Corridors stretched endlessly, only to loop him back to Eternabrew or the ominous departures board. The truth sank in: Brendan wasn't just a traveler, he was a passenger. Determined to escape this twilight limbo, he retraced his steps, trying to remember how he got here. Memories from just hours ago felt like lifetimes past. He recalled his last flight, the turbulent weather, the panic in the cabin, the nosedive. He was interrupted from his thoughts by a soft voice. It was the flapper-dressed woman. "You're new here," she said, more a statement than a question. "I don't belong here," Brendan replied desperately. "There's been a mistake." She looked at him, sympathy in her eyes. "We all think that at first. But this terminal, it has a way of making you accept your fate." "Is there no way out?" Brendan pleaded. The woman sighed. "There might be one. They say if you confront your regrets and find peace, the terminal lets you go." Brendan closed his eyes, thinking of all his life's regrets, relationships he'd abandoned, opportunities he'd missed, loved ones he'd left waiting. One memory stood out. The day he'd left home after a fight with his mother, never to see her again. Tears streaming down, Brendan whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom." Suddenly, the dimness of Terminal 0 was pierced by a ray of sunlight. The oppressive fog outside the black windows began to clear. The figures around him faded away, their murmurs becoming distant echoes. When Brendan opened his eyes, he found himself back in the bustling airport, surrounded by lively travelers, the sounds of announcements, and the scent of fresh coffee. Terminal 0 was nowhere to be seen. Though shaken, Brendan felt a lightness in his step, a newfound appreciation for life. He decided then to visit his childhood home, to pay respects to his mother and confront his past. As he boarded his connecting flight, he realized Terminal Zero had given him a second chance, an opportunity to live free from the weight of regret. Lila had spent hours on the plane, in a middle seat, sandwiched between two people who took up more than their share of armrest. Exhausted, she just wanted to grab her suitcase and head straight to her hotel room. At the baggage claim, amid the sea of similar-looking luggage, she spotted a black suitcase that looked identical to hers. She checked the tag. It was a bit faded, but it seemed to read L. James, close enough to her L. Jones. Without further thought, she took it and headed to her hotel. Settling into her luxurious suite, she decided to freshen up. She unzipped the suitcase and paused. Inside wasn't her neatly packed wardrobe. Instead, she found old, moth-eaten clothes stained with what looked like dried blood. A chill ran down her spine as she rummaged further. There was a small leather-bound diary, its pages yellowed with age, a tarnished silver locket, and, most disturbingly, a collection of old black and white photographs of various women, all appearing unconscious or worse, with eyes that screamed silent horrors. She should have reported it. She should have returned the suitcase immediately. But an overwhelming curiosity compelled her to open the diary. July the 17th, 1953. She looked just like her. I had to have her. The locket looked perfect on her. But she struggled. They always do. Lila snapped the diary shut, her heart pounding. Her initial thought was that she'd stumbled upon belongings of a serial killer from the past. She knew she needed to hand these over to the police. But first, she decided to examine the locket. As she touched it, a wave of dizziness swept over her. Visions clouded her sight. An elegant ballroom from a past era, a beautiful woman wearing the very locket, dancing, laughing, and a man watching her with dark, obsessive eyes. The vision shifted, and she saw the same woman, terrified, tied to a chair in a dimly lit room, the man whispering promises of eternal love and eternal suffering. Lila came back to the present with a gasp, dropping the locket. The room felt colder. The boundaries between the past and the present seemed to blur. Suddenly, a sharp knock jolted her. "Housekeeping." A voice called. Relieved, Lila approached the door. Through the peephole, however, she didn't see a hotel staff member. Instead, she met the gaze of a man with dark, familiar eyes, the man from her vision. Panic set in as he knocked again, more forcefully this time. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Lila backed away from the door, searching the room for an exit. The balcony. She could perhaps climb down. But as she approached it, the knocking grew louder, more desperate. "You can't escape, my dear," the voice seethed with menace. "Return what's mine, and I might spare you." She looked around the room, frantically searching for a weapon. The heavy lamp on the nightstand. Grabbing it, she positioned herself beside the door, ready to strike if he entered. A sudden silence enveloped the room. Minutes felt like hours. Then, with a terrifying force, the door burst open. But there was no one there, only the chilling wind from the hallway. Confused, Lila dared to peek outside. The corridor was empty. It was as if the man had vanished into thin air. Taking a deep breath, she decided to get rid of the suitcase and its sinister contents. She wouldn't let this cursed baggage claim her. Rushing to the hotel lobby, she informed the manager about the mix-up and left the suitcase with him, urging him to call the police. Back in her room, Lila felt a weight lifted. She decided to take a shower to wash away the fear and unease. As the warm water cascaded over her, she tried to shake off the horrors of the evening. Emerging from the shower, she froze. On the steamy bathroom mirror, written with a finger, were the words, "I'll always find you." The locket, which she had left in the main room, now lay on the bathroom counter, gleaming ominously. The realization was clear and chilling. The spirit attached to the items in the suitcase, bound by obsession and dark desires, had found a new object of his affection. She wasn't just dealing with a forgotten suitcase, she was now entangled with a relentless entity from the past, hell-bent on claiming her as his own. Determined, Lila decided she wouldn't be another victim. She'd unravel the mystery behind this malevolent spirit, put him to rest, and reclaim her life. The game of sinister cat and mouse had just begun. Ben's eyes drooped, the exhaustion from the 3 back-to-back conferences he had attended over the week catching up to him. With a 2-hour layover at Newark Liberty International Airport, he found an isolated spot at Gate 22, leaned his head back, and was soon in a deep slumber. He awoke with a start, the sound of a plane's engine humming in his ears. Blinking in confusion, he found himself seated inside an aircraft, darkened save for the occasional flicker of overhead lights. Glancing at his boarding pass, he read Flight 1313. He didn't remember boarding. He didn't remember hearing any announcements. And he certainly didn't remember booking a Flight 1313. Looking around, he noticed the passengers all seated, heads tilted, many with closed eyes. The stillness was unsettling. A cold shiver ran down Ben's spine as he realized the people were not just resting, they were eerily lifeless, almost transparent. An old woman seated next to him, her skin pale and wrinkles deep set, suddenly turned her gaze towards Ben. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice tremulous. Ben, trying to maintain composure, replied, "What is this? Where are we headed?" She looked ahead, her cloudy eyes filled with sorrow. "This is the flight of the forgotten, the ones who have no resting place, the souls lost in transition." As the words sunk in, the weight of his reality pressed heavily on him. But he was alive. He remembered his life vividly. His dog, Bella, his fiancée, Ellis, the house they had just bought together. There had to be a mistake. Ben rose, moving towards the cabin. He had to speak to the crew, explain the error. As he moved, the cabin seemed to stretch endlessly. Each step felt like an eternity. But finally, he reached a curtain separating the passengers from what he presumed to be the cockpit. Pulling it aside, he didn't find the cockpit, but instead an old dimly lit train compartment. A child, no older than 7, sat clutching a teddy bear. His period clothing suggested the early 1900s. The child looked up, eyes filled with confusion and fear. "I was on the Titanic," he whispered. "I'm trying to find my mum." Before Ben could respond, the scenery shifted again. Now, he stood in a war-torn battlefield, facing a young soldier with terror in his eyes. The bullet it came out of nowhere, the soldier mumbled, touching a bloody stain on his uniform. With each shift, Ben encountered souls from different eras, all lost, all searching for closure. Each scene was a snippet of history, a glimpse into countless lives cut short, their souls trapped in an endless loop of their final moments. Panic consumed Ben. He wasn't dead, he couldn't be. Desperate, he tried to recall the last memory before falling asleep. An argument with Ellis, walking away, the sound of screeching tires, and then darkness. His heart sank. The memories flooded back. He had stormed out after their fight, and in his anger, he hadn't seen the speeding car. Suddenly, a voice, almost musical, resonated through the cabin. "Flight 1313, prepare for landing." Landing? But where? Ben returned to his seat, gripping the armrests as the plane started its descent. Outside, an ethereal city gleamed, shimmering spires reaching towards a radiant sky. The plane touched down, and the once passive passengers now animatedly gathered their belongings. The old woman, her face now radiant, smiled at Ben. "Every soul finds its way, in time," she murmured. Ben stepped out, the surroundings unfamiliar yet oddly comforting. Towering figures, glowing with a soft light, awaited the disembarking passengers, guiding them towards the city. One such figure approached Ben, a gentle smile on its face. "You're not meant to stay, Benjamin," it said. "Your journey here was premature. There's a life waiting for you, a chance to mend, to love, to grow." Before Ben could comprehend, he was back at gate 22, the bustling sounds of the airport around him. Blinking, he checked his watch. It was still his layover time. Had it been a dream? A hallucination? But the vivid memories of Flight 1313 and the lost souls felt all too real. Picking up his phone, Ben dialed Ellis. "I'm so sorry," he began, tears in his eyes, grateful for a second chance and a lesson from the forgotten. As the clock ticks towards dawn, this is Midnight Callers signing off, reminding you, when darkness falls, the stories rise. Sleep tight, if you dare.